Hey, what's going on, everyone? I can see we got a couple of people in the chat, and now I'm actually regretting having that music play because I can't really respond to you guys, or I guess I talk over the music or whatever. Hope you're having a great week. It is Thursday, July 26th, and today we have a lot of interesting stuff to talk about. One of the most significant, I think, is Samsung's announcement that they have an unbreakable phone display. Apple has confirmed that the MacBook Pro does have a CPU throttling bug, but they have released an update for that, so good to hear that they are taking care of business and, fessing up to, yeah, we made a mistake, and here's the fix, so that's cool. I certainly don't have a problem with that. Amazon's facial recognition matches 28 members of Congress to criminal mugshots. I know what you're saying already, only 28? But seriously, this should be cause for concern. If you're trying to find criminals and you're, picking random people or picking members of Congress who we hope do not match up with these criminal faces, and it's giving false positives, that could lead to a lot of problems for the rest of us. Rolls-Royce is the latest company with a flying taxi concept. It's going to happen eventually. It's just a question of when, and there are a lot of other questions that go along with how that's going to work. Precious metal sparks a new gold rush. Well, if it's a precious metal that's not gold, I guess it's not really a gold rush, but that's what the article was titled. And more Apple Store robberies. Surprise! All right, let's talk some tech. I wanted to respond real quick to a couple of comments here in the chat. Nate, how many... Are you logged in as like two different people? Because I see two Nates right now. Keeping busy, yes, indeed, Carl. And trying to fix MHF4 micro coax cable, not finding any tools. Are you talking about the kind of antenna cables that go inside of a phone? Like those little tiny ones? Because that's going to be a tricky one. Making me think of porn music. Okay, sorry. Yeah, I don't know. There's only so much when it comes to royalty-free music, and if you were here Monday, I made a mistake and had some music playing in the background. It was actually on a video that I was showing, so I couldn't hear it through my monitor, and I played some copyrighted music for, I don't know, 20, 30 seconds until, fortunately, one of you or several of you alerted me to that, and of course, at the end of the stream, I kind of thought it's better to err on the side of caution because YouTube takes this stuff pretty seriously, and we don't want them saying that I'm using music I'm not authorized to. I've already gone through that once with music that I own the license for, and they still flagged me. So just to be safe, I deleted that live stream. Unfortunately, I was not recording it, so it's gone for good, so I've got to do that demo all over again. But if you were here, you saw it, and if not, we'll do it again later on. Let's see. Must be quality viewing. They are so corrupt in Congress. I'm sure there is no mistaken identity. Yeah, I always laugh about this stuff when I hear people talk about how we need to start drug testing people who get public assistance or unemployment, or, when you go to work, obviously, there's all sorts of employers that do drug testing and background checks, and they want a sample, fingerprint and an iris scan and a DNA and all this stuff. I understand. That's cool. If you're an employer and that's your option, fine. I'm curious, though, as to whether or not we're performing these same sort of tests, background checks, drug screening and random drug tests and things like that for the people who are in Congress, for the people who control and write and approve these laws. Are they subject to those same types of testing, that same type of testing? Because it seems like that might be the place you want to start, right? Because we want the people in charge to be trustworthy and to be adhering to the same policies that they want everyone else to. Just a thought. Anyways, I'm getting too off track there. Switched accounts. Okay, gotcha. Mention that in the chat. Yeah, it was you guys. Thank you so much, man. Please keep your shirt on, Mike. What? Oh, yeah. No. I was referring to another comment about porn music. It's not supposed to be porn music. It's royalty-free, and it's, it does sound a bit like some old 70s stuff. What are you going to do? A quick question for you, Nate. I meant to ask you Monday, did you get your Chinese parts in? This is always a concern for people who are repairing phones. I ordered something from China. Am I going to get it? Is it going to get here? Is it going to get through customs? Especially now that we have ICE and all sorts of other organizations who are checking to make sure that we don't get anything that has an Apple or a Samsung logo or any other company logo printed on it. Did you get your stuff, Nate? I've been on the edge of my seat waiting, and I keep forgetting to ask you because we get into the stream. And I got something else for you here that you might be interested in also. But first, let's start off with this, because I think this is the big one that this was released, I want to say last night. I read about it for the first time, and then of course today every forum and every chat and every group that I belong to is saying, oh no, look, Samsung's making an unbreakable screen. And if you've been around for any period of time, this is certainly not the first time a company has come up with an unbreakable or shatterproof or shatter resistant or waterproof or any other thing, you know, super phone that can't be broken. And of course, up until now, and the first one really was Gorilla Glass, right? They put Gorilla Glass on phones and everyone said, oh, well, that's it for the repair industry. We're never going to be able to fix phone screens again because they won't break anymore because they're made out of Gorilla Glass. And then they were made out of Gorilla Glass 2 and then Gorilla Glass 3 and then Gorilla Glass, we're up to Gorilla Glass 6 right now. And Samsung claiming to have an unbreakable screen, which has been certified by Underwriters Laboratories, who does testing on this kind of stuff, and they're kind of a neutral party, so they're not biased supposedly in any way, and they can put it through their tests and say, yeah, this does meet our definition of unbreakable. Now, what exactly does that mean? Well, that remains to be debated and questioned, I think. But I want to go through the article briefly here, and then let's talk about it, because this is something that, you know, again, from the beginning of phone repairs, I'd say for the first 2, 3, I don't know, maybe 5 years or so, you know, initially we had cooperation from the manufacturers. They would send us to training and certify us to work on their phones. And then after a while, they decided that wasn't in their best interest, so they kind of stopped offering those certifications. And even the ones that you see nowadays don't really mean a lot. If someone says that, hey, I'm Apple certified, that doesn't mean a whole lot, you know, and those of us who do these repairs know that anyone who's certified by Apple is actually limited to a very few specific repairs that they can do, and they can't really get into the deeper stuff, which is what people end up looking for quite often. So when it comes to this, though, here is what this article said, and it says, and this is on BGR. You can find these sources down in the bottom. Before I forget to say so, all of the information that we talk about here, I put the links in the bottom so you can go check them out for yourself, see who is saying this stuff, you know, and make sure that it's legit or it comes from a reputable source. And of course, if you like the video, please, friends, hit the like button. If you don't like it, feel free to hit the dislike button. Every interaction counts, but I certainly appreciate the likes. And after the troll that we had last week that kind of destroyed my rank, you know, destroyed my like-dislike ratio, I would be what's the word? Grateful. I would be grateful if you guys hit the like button. It really helps me out a lot. So Samsung's flexible display is fortified by a plastic window. So this right here at the very beginning of the article, this should give you a clue as to what to expect. We've seen this before, and here's the big problem with plastic and the reason that we don't make phones with plastic screens. One, they tend not to be as responsive to the touch. This is why we have glass panels on phone screens, and this is why that glass cannot be too thick, because if it is, you're going to have problems unless you embed the digitizer towards the very front of the glass, which obviously makes it more prone to damage. So that's one of the concerns. Now, Samsung may have developed some sort of technology to prevent that plastic from, you know, maybe enabling it to be as conductive as a piece of glass can be, you know, so that there's no problem with the touch sensitivity. That part I'll buy. But beyond that, what type of plastic do you know of that doesn't just tend to get scratched severely over a short period of time? And this is the main problem that we've seen with plastic screens. They just don't hold up very well under normal use. You know, if you've got them in your pants pocket, or it's sitting on a table somewhere, or it goes across a surface that has some sand or dust or dirt or anything else like that, if women are carrying them around in their purses, you throw it in your glove box, every little nick starts to show up on the plastic over time. And this is one of the things that Motorola tried with their Shattershield design. They had a phone that you could literally drop from a rooftop and it would not break, you know, until after several drops. The problem is they get scratched up real fast, and people don't like the way that that looks. And obviously at that point they say, well, you know, my screen works, but it looks terrible, so can you replace it for me? And that's, you know, kind of the, I think, the future of most plastic screens, unless they develop some magical substance that will be durable, touch sensitive, and not be scratched, you know, much easier than glass is, because glass is fairly hard when you compare it to plastic. You know, the density is much stronger, so that's why we don't. And of course, you got the oleophobic coating that goes over the top, and that reduces the fingerprints. So I'm very skeptical about this for that reason. On top of that, the fact that Samsung is launching a new phone, what is it, next month or the month after, this would certainly make for good press to create some buzz about Samsung possibly doing something new with their screens. Maybe they'll be Unbreakable, which would be, you know, the greatest thing ever for phones. They're also talking about developing their own GPU in the future on their phones so that they won't have to buy that component from other manufacturers. So we'll see, you know. Now, another thing about this article, if you'll notice here in the second area that I've highlighted, it says that the tests are based on military standards set by the U.S. Department of Defense. Okay, I want to tell you one thing that I discovered very recently about military standards when it comes to phones. There really is no such thing. The military does not have a standard that is established for phones. I did some digging and looked around and saw all these claims about military this, military spec, military drop test. And as far as the military is concerned, they don't have a standard that is related or has anything to do with phones. So you can kind of take that with, you know, a certain amount of skepticism as well. No change, it says, has resulted to normal functioning and no damage to the display's front, side, or edges after dropping it from nearly 4 feet 26 times in a row. So, you know, here's the other question. This display that they were dropping, I would assume, was not attached to a phone, because if it was, then they would already have a prototype phone that's using this display, and we probably would have seen some leaked images of that. So I'm wondering if they aren't taking just the display by itself, which obviously isn't going to be very heavy, dropping it from 4 feet, then going and attaching it to something that will generate an image and see if it's still going to function the way that it was originally intended to. So again, you know, we don't have the inside on this, but every time I hear about the miracle cure or the miracle solution for anything, you know, from cancer to, you know, you name it, anything you can possibly think of, it seems like those claims tend to come closer to reality. You know, when they come out, it's like, nah, it's not really exactly what they're saying. So there could be a certain amount of hype, obviously, associated with this article. And Samsung says it developed a flexible OLED with an unbreakable substrate and an overlay window secured to it. Obviously, this window is flexible. That would make sense if it's plastic. The interesting thing, of course, about this would be that the display itself is flexible. And this is a thing that we are really expecting to happen at some time in the near future, and that is for Samsung to release a foldable display, which, you know, would be exciting for a number of reasons. If you could take a big screen, fold it in half, and stick it in your pocket that much easier, that would be kind of cool. I think they still have some challenges in order to make that a reality. But, and on this one, of course, we have to wait and see. They're not going to give us everything, but we'll certainly keep up to date on any new information that comes out about this display. And I would say, don't sell your phone repair shop tools or anything else at this point in time, because I've noticed one thing consistently in my, let's see, it's only been like 24 years of phone repair experience, and that is every time a manufacturer develops a new technology that we think is going to be detrimental to what we do for a living, to our livelihood. You know, we always say, oh, this new thing's coming. I mean, the sky is always falling in this business. This new phone came out, we're never going to be able to fix them again. You know, Apple's going to match their displays to the motherboard, and then we'll never be able to switch them out. You know, every year it's something new. And so far, one thing that's consistently been happening is that these new technologies that we see in phones have consistently produced more opportunities for us. So every time there's a new step, there's this new screen that does this, there's this new fingerprint reader that does this. Well, that's probably the one exception. Fingerprint scanner did kind of give us some problems. But other than that, every other new technology that we see introduced for communications tends to give us more opportunities to create more business for us to help our customers get the solutions that they need. And for that reason, I'm still fairly confident that we'll be okay, even if Samsung comes out with the bendable plastic coated display. Those are just my thoughts. I want to hear from you guys. What do you think about this? Let me back up. Let's get the comments over here on the screen so we can see them later on when I edit the video. Nate got his Parts back unmolested. Good, I'm glad to hear that. Almost $1,000 worth of Samsung parts, screens, and back glass, all with logo. Hey, congratulations, man. I got to tell you, every time I hear that or every time I order something like that, I'm kind of sweating it a little bit. Like, is it going to end up in customs, or are they going to say, you can't help people fix their phones? That's against the law. You have to use parts that aren't from the manufacturer so that way your customers don't have the same, I don't know, it's weird. But I'm glad to hear you got that back. Apple certified is a joke, indeed. I have people ask if I'm certified and I laugh at them. Well, that's just mean. But, you know, it's unfortunate. We have companies that actually have Apple certified printed on their advertising, printed on their business cards, and we've called them to ask them about their certification, and it is about what you could expect. So, you know, if Apple ever decided to really crack down on people who were using their name, you know, Apple certified without authorization, they could be in trouble. And even with it, all it means is I can only fix your screen and replace your battery. That's what Apple certified, to my knowledge. Apple certified means I can change out screens and I can replace batteries. That's it. For those reasons alone, I do not want to be Apple certified. I don't want Apple to say, oh, you replaced a charge port, you replaced a front-facing camera, you're going to lose your Apple certification now. Don't help your customers with those repairs. I mean, it doesn't make sense. I don't get it. When are they going to implement adamantium coating on phone displays, same as in Captain America's shield? Well, I don't know, Johnny. They should. And when they do, obviously, one of the things that's going to happen is people are going to buy or upgrade their phones less often. And this is the other thing that always makes me think about these breakthroughs in technology. If there's something that a manufacturer can do to make your phone last longer, that means they need to make more money from that phone than they would have if they knew that you would have to upgrade or repair or whatever in a shorter period of time, right? Or you build in the obsolescence within the operating system. So if you make a super durable phone, you have to make sure that there's something about the operating system that is going to make the user want to upgrade after a certain period of time. Because if they don't, you lose that, you know, that they're not a customer for, you know, another year, whatever it is. So it's either that, or you charge them a lot more for the phone because you know that it's going to last that much longer. I mean, it's simple. It's business, right? I mean, that's kind of how it works. Vibranium? Maybe it's Chinese military standards. After all phones are made in China. You have a point there, Harvey. Well, most phones, right? We have some that are manufactured in Korea, and I want to say a couple other places, actually. But yeah, for the most part, as far as we're concerned, it's all coming from China one way or another. Does that mean I can say my repairs are up to military standards, Nate? I think you would be safe to say that your repairs are done to the same specifications that military standards have for phones when they're brand new. That would be fair. That would be a true statement. I know you wouldn't say that, but it would be accurate. Remember, marketing material promises the sky and sometimes do not deliver fully. Yeah, I gotta say. Does transracial... Okay, that was not for me. Let's see. I wonder if ICE is taking well-known YouTubers, aka third-party repairers, to check their incoming shipments under Apple direction. It's a good question, Greg. In fact, I do remember Jessa Jones talking about an order that she had made, and I think it got confiscated by ICE, and then she started wondering if maybe Apple saw her YouTube channel and decided to single her out and try to intercept her shipment, and I'm skeptical about that one as well, but who knows, you know, anything's possible, right? So, enough about this. I would say don't panic, but as usual, if you're in the phone repair business or any other business, diversification is important. If you're only fixing phones, you should certainly be thinking about what other devices or what other equipment you're capable of fixing, because there's lots of other opportunities out there. And what I found with most of the people that I've trained and I've worked with is that after you develop this skill for repairs, you find that it kind of branches off into other areas of your life. I mean, I've worked on things that I would have never thought about fixing before that have nothing to do with electronics. I'm talking about shower heads, things on my car, things around the house, you know, dishwashers, refrigerators, things that I wouldn't normally tamper with. But after you kind of gain that mechanical knowledge and you can watch all sorts of helpful stuff on YouTube and iFixit's website and all over the place, it's amazing how those skills kind of transfer over to other areas. So I sure don't think that if you get good at repairing phones, if you become competent at phone repair, that there won't always be tons of opportunities out there for you in the world, which makes me feel good about what I'm doing. And you can always start a YouTube channel too. That's kind of fun. All right, let's move on here. Apple has confirmed, fessed up, that there was a MacBook Pro CPU throttling bug, but there is a fix. And for Apple, I will give credit on this one, because anytime a company does something that says, hey, we made a mistake and we're going to fix it, that to me says a lot about that company. And Apple, unfortunately, has not had a track record of admitting to faults until it was too late. And the downside to this is that because this was something that they could fix, and let's go down to here real quick. Following a number of theories circulating online, Apple has confirmed the issue pertains to the notebook's thermal management system. We talked about this last week. The software update coming, this says today, but this was a couple days ago, I believe, adds a missing digital key, which will remedy the problem. Okay, cool. So it was a software fix, so easy one, right? All we have to do is release an update, and it's all taken care of. Last week, someone found the clock speeds of 2.9 gigahertz were as low as 2.2 during heavy workloads. The user was able to achieve speeds closer to the advertised level by placing his MacBook in the freezer for the process, which, you know, if you have a walk-in freezer, I mean, that could be realistic. You just take your computer in the freezer with you and you do your work there as fast as you can, or dress for it, I guess. Apple advertises the MacBook Pro as the most powerful version of its professional laptop ever. And to this, I say once again, shouldn't it be? If it's your top-of-the-line model and it's the latest model, the latest version of that model, should it not be the most powerful ever? It wouldn't make any sense to me that this cracks me up when manufacturers make these claims. This year's model is the best one. It's the most powerful. It's the fastest. If it's not, what are you doing? Are you just making stuff that's inferior to your older versions? I don't know. I don't know why they always say that. It's funny. So here's the thing. The Pro is more faster and powerful than with 8th generation 6-core Intel Core. Did I read that right? With 8th generation 6-core Intel Core processors on the 15-inch MacBook Pro for up to 70% faster performance and 8th generation quad-core Intel Core processors on the 13-inch model, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so here's my question. Had this been something different that was not a software, there was no software remedy for it. What if they realized that there was a component missing inside of the machine that had to be installed or had to be replaced or was defective? Would they have instead started a recall and said, okay, bring your MacBook in, we're gonna fix the problem and give it back to you, kind of like they did with the keyboard thing? Would they say, well, we're going to swap it out and give you a refurbished model or a new model that has the correct hardware built into it? Or would they kind of wait until the warranty period was over and say, yes, you're right, there was a problem, and if you're still under warranty 2 years later, now we'll fix it for you? And I don't know the answer to that question, but I always wonder, you know, how they would have treated that. Fortunately, this time it was a software fix, so it wasn't a big deal. They pushed out an update, and supposedly the problem is all taken care of until we hear anything from anyone else. I will assume that is the case. Let's see. Thing is, did Apple not test this MacBook Pro under conditions that pros would use this laptop for, aka rendering videos? I'm going to guess maybe not, or maybe not long enough, or maybe not in a room that was the same temperature at this time of year that theirs was. Who knows? You know, it's plausible that when you test something under factory settings, that when you get out into the real world, things are going to be different. And we find this out all the time about things like IP ratings. If you've got a phone that's water resistant to, you know, X number of feet for X number of time in a laboratory when the water is stationary, that's a lot different than someone dropping their phone and it hits the bottom of the bathtub, or it ends up, you know, hits the porcelain inside of a toilet, or it's in a river where there's current running through. You know, these things are all different. So all these variables, I suspect, would make it difficult to test under every single condition that exists. But did they even bother to try to max it out and see how it performed? I don't know. That's a good question, Greg. The new MacBook Pro has issues with the VRM instead of cooling. Oh, that's nice. I like working on my laptop in cold rooms, especially when working on videos. That's probably the best thing to do, right? And by the way, guys, if you're on here Monday, supposedly the problems I was having with my stream, outside of playing music in the background were not due to my computer. There was a problem with my internet service provider, and everyone's connection got screwed up at about the time that my videos started looking choppy. So I suspect that might have something to do with it. We'll find out next Monday. My plan is to do more live repair videos on Mondays. Hopefully, if everything works properly, that'll be the plan. And then we'll save the talk stuff for Thursday nights. Real World Review and Real World Review split an iPhone 10 board the other day, and we got it on video. So we are going to do some sort of collaboration video on that so you guys can check it out. It was much faster, much simpler, and really required not a whole lot in the way of special tools to do. So that's the good news. It doesn't look like getting those things apart is going to be that difficult. Now putting them back together will be interesting. But a lot of those connections that go around the outside that bond the two sandwich boards together are actually ground. So it's not every single one I think that needs to be attached. And the ones that are on the inner side are actually going out to circuits that are crucial. So I'll be getting that together here in the next couple days. Ductility, let's see. What is Apple in their inability to add proper thermal management? Most, if not all, of their laptops have only one fan and not a lot of space inside. And let's see, we could probably add a couple other things to that list. And Harvey, I suspect that the department that handles ergonomics and form factor for Apple has quite a bit of pull when it comes to designing their equipment. This is just the impression that I get. From what we've seen with MacBooks, there is insufficient cooling, and a lot of that could be solved by making the computer a little thicker, by giving a little more room. But my guess is that they're probably trying to make it, make everything as small as possible. And when you do that, obviously you don't have a lot of airspace, you don't have a lot of real estate left over to install fans, and you end up with something that gets very hot very fast. And I suspect that's not going to change very much unless they develop some newer type of technology that allows things to run cooler, which they should eventually. That's just my guess. All right, so let's move on here. I'm burning up the time here. I don't want to stay on track. Amazon's facial recognition matches 28 members of Congress to criminal mug shots. What? Yeah, so this is kind of strange. I haven't been following this too much. I knew it was a thing. I knew it existed. But this, I believe, is cause for concern for everyone, not for criminals, for everyone, criminal and non-criminal alike. Well, if you're a criminal, you probably get what you deserve eventually. But if you're not, if you're just a normal, average, everyday person driving down the street and you get your face run through an ID system that says, oh, you're this wanted criminal instead of who you really are, well, obviously that can cause some problems. So what happened here is that the ACLU was able to get a demo copy of Amazon's facial recognition system. It's called Rekognition with a K, and it cost them about $12. So here's the interesting thing about this. And I don't know if this is open to the general public, but we do know that law enforcement, and that in this case at least the ACLU, was able to get a hold of a copy of this to experiment with. They scanned the faces of all 535 members of Congress against 25,000 public mugshots. So they try to match them up and see if anybody's the same person using Amazon's Open Recognition API. None of the members of Congress were in the mugshot lineup, but Amazon's system generated 28 false matches, a finding that the ACLU says raises serious concerns about Rekognition's use by police, which you can imagine. And here's the thing. An Amazon spokesperson attributed the results to poor calibration. They're saying that they set this software at a confidence threshold of 80%. So at an 80% accuracy or an 80% confidence threshold, this thing makes a lot of mistakes. Enough mistakes so that they found 28 out of 535 people matched up to a criminal mugshot. So obviously this is not a high enough success rate to be reliable, for one thing. And secondly, you can imagine the problem here. When we hear about things like swattings, where somebody pulls a prank and we end up with the SWAT team going to somebody's house and it's the wrong house, That's something we want to avoid, right? We don't want law enforcement to think that there is a crime of, serious magnitude or a wanted criminal who could be armed and dangerous to look just like you, to have a system that say you are that person even though you're not. So, some real cause for concern here. Now, in May, when an ACLU report showed the system being used by a number of law enforcement agencies, including a real-time recognition pilot by Orlando Police. The pilot has expired for Orlando, although the department continues to use the system. And again, the cost being only about $12 a month for the entire department. So obviously, if someone says, hey, we have something that's going to help you fight crime, and it's $12 a month, why would you not want to use it? I mean, it's practically free, right? But if it's only 80% accurate, or you've only got an 80% level of confidence that this person really is a criminal, what do? You err on the side of safety, right? You assume that this is the person that the software says it is, because in the worst case scenario, if it is, you don't want to treat them like an average everyday citizen, because that could be dangerous for everyone involved, right? So some real potential problems here with this software. The test also showed indications of racial bias, a long-standing problem for many facial recognition systems. 11 of the 28 false matches misidentified people of color, roughly 39%, including civil rights leader Representative John Lewis and 5 other members of the Congressional Black Caucus. NIST's facial recognition vendor test, which has shown consistently higher error rates for facial recognition tests on women and African Americans. So this is obviously a big problem, and they say that the reason for this is that they don't have as large of a database for, I don't know if, well, they say people of color. I would assume that minorities would be the correct term in this situation. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know what to say anymore these days, but when you have a small percentage of the population, obviously there's a smaller sample rate, so it becomes increasingly less accurate. If you have fewer people to sample from, you don't really get a good database, and it's tough for this machine, I guess, to figure out who is and who isn't who you think they are. The system used by London's Metropolitan Police produces as many as 49 false matches for every hit, requiring police to sort through the false positives manually. Now, obviously, this is the safeguard for this type of system. First, it says this person is a criminal. And second, some human takes a look at the 2 different photographs and says, oh, no, the machine made a mistake. That's not who we think it is. Or yes, this is a positive match. I, with my eyes, can see that this is in fact the same person, which sounds great, right? The problem is if we're looking at something like a surveillance situation where a camera picks up an image and says, this person that you're looking for, this wanted criminal, is driving this car, or this wanted criminal is inside of this building or this business or this home or this residence, and you can't actually see them. Before anyone takes the time to compare those 2 photos, you have to assume that that is really what's happening, right, for safety reasons. So we would certainly want to have a higher degree of accuracy, I think, before we start to rely on something like this to make serious decisions that, could be up to life-threatening. Critics say even checking a person's identity can do damage. Imagine a police officer getting a false match for somebody with a concealed weapon arrest. Yeah, and you can imagine, they would have every reason to be overly cautious if the system says, hey, there's somebody with a concealed weapon arrest right over there, 20 feet from you, or whatever the distance might be. Many states treat mugshots as public records, which explains why the ACLU was able to go through all these mugshots. And as I stated, they paid $12.33 for these tests, which, there's nothing prohibitive as far as cost goes when it comes to getting this software. Okay, I'm going to back up here, guys, because I think I missed a whole lot of comments. And I'm going to try not to read the ones that aren't directed at me, but sometimes it happens. What can I say? Perhaps Amazon is just the Tom Cruise movie, aka predictive crimes in the future and politicians are involved. You may be onto something there, Greg. They say there is a big probability for a face double for each of us among all of the people in the world. Good call. I hope that we hope that our doppelganger is not a serial killer or some other type of criminal that we have to worry about, right? Could you imagine that? That would really be unfortunate. You can run for Congress even if you're convicted of a felony. Well, only in America, right? Is that true? You can run for Congress if you're convicted of a felony? I didn't know that. Is that in every state or just some? Because I know for one thing, if you live in Nevada and you have a felony, you can't do anything. You can't even vote. What a crooked policy. That sounds crazy. I didn't know that. I refuse to acknowledge facial recognition. It's evil. I agree with you, Arthur. I'm not into it. I don't use it. I mean, if people want to, that's cool. And maybe later I will change my mind, but at this point, I'm not, I don't look forward to having something scan my face, although I'm, we're all over. Look at me. I have a YouTube channel. My face and my voice are all over the place. So when they start making things that don't really exist, they make people say things that they didn't really say. Look at the sample they're going to have for any YouTuber. They're going to have tons and tons to work with on that. And my understanding is it only takes a couple paragraphs to do that. So much AI is still 20 years behind. I vote that we all wear burqas. Okay, I'm not going to touch that one because we're going to open up a can of worms, but that could be interesting. Only if you care and know them well to kick them out of the office. Oh, we're talking about politicians here. Good night. Hey, Vernell Thompson, how are you? Most states you can be a felon, congressman, woman. Wow, I did not know that. That's interesting and somehow not surprising, I suppose. So that's what's going on. This is kind of creepy, if you ask me, and I'll be following this one too because, a system that makes this many mistakes can cause some serious problems. And, eventually I'm sure the accuracy will be 99.9%, which probably most of us can live with, but 80% doesn't seem too encouraging at this point. And they talked about other countries also. I wanted to mention this. I think it was in a separate article, but they were talking about how in China and a couple other places, they were getting a ridiculous amount of false positives because there were certain regions where similarities in facial features were so close. And this is one of the problems that the iPhone 10, if you remember, had with discerning one person from another. A lady and her neighbor matched the same thing. So apparently certain features that are scanned through facial recognition tend to be prevalent and very similar in certain regions of the world. And for them, especially if they have a huge population, that is going to be a tricky thing to work with. And especially when we read all the stuff about China actually implementing this type of, facial recognition stuff out in public just to monitor people's everyday activities. It's kind of crazy. Johnny says, no, but you can run for office again once you get out. Well, I heard the silly, kind of funny thing here. They were talking about how Trump said that if he's ever convicted of anything, he could just pardon himself, right? And then there was a judge or two who said, yeah, I don't think that's really the way it works. And I think the thing's still open to debate. And then someone came out with this plan. It was like, if you were president, and it could be Trump or anyone else, you're president, you get convicted, the vice president becomes president, he pardons you, then he resigns, and you become president again. So technically, if you think about it, you probably could be anywhere, and the presidential pardon could get you out of everything. If everyone cooperated, you could become a criminal, be pardoned by your successor, and then become his vice president, and then he resigns and you're president again. So it's almost like diplomatic immunity for the most part within your own country. And here I thought only in the politics were the Cosa Nostra. What? Okay, that wasn't for me. All right, so let's move on, folks. There's a new taxi in town. Well, supposedly. There's a new company that wants to get into the business of a flying taxi, and it's Rolls-Royce, but not the Rolls-Royce you might be thinking of. This is not the car company. This is the engine manufacturer, and they are talking about this right here. It is called, what is it called, Mike? It is called the eVTOL, or Electric Vertical Takeoff and Landing Concept Vehicle. It can carry up to 5 people at speeds of up to 250 miles an hour for up to 500 miles. Sounds like fun, right? So this is actually, believe it or not, so even though it's called the Electric Vertical Takeoff and Landing, it is in fact a hybrid that runs through a gas turbine engine that charges a battery pack, which in turn powers 6 electric motors mounted on the wings and tail. And for some reason, they felt that this was a more efficient way to take advantage of the electrical motors. and to cut down on the charging time. So this is one of the big drawbacks, of course, with electric cars, is that they take a long time to charge up, although we're working on new technologies for that. This thing has 6 electric motors that change direction, obviously. So you take off vertically. Let's get back to the image here. You take off vertically, and of course, once you get up into the air, the engines would then tilt and make the plane fly faster, more efficiently, and cut down on the engine noise. So it sounds like a great idea, I guess, sort of. Still, obviously, a lot of questions that need to be addressed when we talk about flying cars and flying taxis. The craft's wings rotate 90 degrees, enabling vertical takeoff and landing. All of this is theoretical, as the unveiling of the EVTOL at Britain's Farnborough Air Show consisted of digital renderings only. So that's right. This is not a prototype. This is not the real thing. This is what the digital renderings look like. So will the final product, if it ever comes to market, look like this? We really don't know. The issues that have grounded previous efforts, such as balancing car-like passenger space with weight and aerodynamics, perfecting vertical takeoff and landing, and the need for an urban traffic control system remain. And that's my big question. If we end up with flying cars or flying taxis or anything like this, how do we keep these things from running into each other and running into birds, running into buildings, all these other things where with normal aviation, we have systems in place that prevent collisions from taking place. Hopefully that's the plan, right? We have buildings that have lights on the top of them. We have certain, clearances that you have to have. I don't fly myself, but when you take off, when you land, you've got to get clearance, and everything's routed and they're offset at different altitudes. Well, with these, if they're piloted by a person, I mean, it could be automatic, right? It could be an automated taxi. But you think that building the infrastructure for a system that prevents anyone from running into anyone else is going to be a real challenge, especially when you have drones in the air. You have all sorts of other things that fly at altitudes much lower than commercial aircraft. And I think that's the real question, is how are we going to route this stuff? And really, it may be that this technology, as far as the plane itself becomes feasible or, is available far, a lot sooner than the systems that need to be put into place to make sure that it's going to be safe. So I think that's the big question that we have on these ones. How are you going to make this stuff work? And everyone keeps talking about it. Uber, of course, talking about launching a flying taxi service in Los Angeles, Dubai, and Dallas-Fort Worth Metro in 2020. We'll have to see if that happens. If you haven't heard lately, apparently one of the problems with Uber is that some of the drivers, allegedly, are saying that their passengers left a mess in the back seat, and they're tacking on like $80 to $150 to their Uber bill, saying that customers did things like threw up on the seat, when the customers are saying, what are you talking about? That never happened. And I don't know how, who is going to be the one that arbitrates these types of disagreements. Like if an Uber driver says, you messed up something in my car, and the passenger said, no, I didn't, is already like that, or I didn't do that, or I never saw that while I was in the car. Who is the deciding party when it comes to the payment? Does PayPal or the PayPal of Uber or Lyft or anyone else say, well, this person, this driver's history is consistent, we haven't seen them complain about anybody, and you're a brand new passenger, or vice versa? How does that work exactly? And do people just get out? I don't know. Arg just had an ad. Sorry, Carl. Hey, you know what? I've got an ad blocker on my browser now, and I'm still seeing ads. I've got uBlock Origin this time, and it was working, and there's a couple pages that it doesn't block for whatever reasons. I don't know. Nothing's perfect, I suppose. But here's something I thought you might find interesting. And I was going to ask you this, Nate, if you're still listening or watching. Have you heard about this already? The new precious metal sparking a gold rush. Or I said that wrong. The precious metal sparking a gold rush. And as I mentioned, if it's not gold, then it's not a gold rush, right? We should say a gold rush. I guess they're using that as the expression and rather than the technical term. But a handful of mining companies are now staking claims at sites in Idaho, Montana, and Alaska, and they are digging for cobalt, which we know is used in the manufacturing of lithium-ion batteries, which we are still using and hoping that we'll find a better alternative to in the near future. In the past, cobalt supply depended on the markets for copper and nickel, more valuable metals that are typically extracted alongside cobalt. But of course, consumption projected to rise between 8 and 10% a year for cobalt is encouraging people to look for anywhere they can to mine it. Now, historically, a lot of the cobalt, something like 50% of the cobalt that's used in lithium-ion batteries, has been mined from the Congo, and there is a real problem with that if you haven't already heard. And I don't want to just, I don't want to be the cloud of doom here, but one of the problems with mining cobalt in the Congo is that there's, a known incidence of using children to mine for cobalt under ridiculous conditions. And this is the downside of it. This is the dark side of cell phones and battery-powered cars, electric cars and everything else that runs on lithium-ion batteries, is that getting these materials is not easy, and in many cases there are some really bad working conditions, and they're using children to go in and mine for this stuff. This is a separate article from CBS News. Now, a report by Amnesty International revealed that cobalt mined by children was ending up in products from several companies, including Apple, Microsoft, Tesla, and Samsung. And I would imagine that Tesla would be using a whole lot of it because their batteries are much bigger than any other electronic device. And at the same time, there are certainly more phones out there than there are electric cars. So it's hard to say, how much of each one is being used. The latest research by the United Nations Children's Fund, or UNICEF, estimates 40,000 children are working in DRC, which is Republic of Congo, right? It's I think it's the Democratic Republic of Congo. Mines more than half of the world's supply of cobalt comes from the DRC, and 20% of that is mined by hand, according to Darton Commodities Ltd, a London-based research company that specializes in cobalt. Now, one of the problems with getting information when it comes to these cobalt mines in the Congo is that there is a lot of conflict going on there, and it's difficult for even news reporters to get inside and find out what's really happening. So we see these pictures, we know things are happening, we don't know to what extent at this point, and then of course when everything gets shipped over to China for manufacturing, there's a lot of questions as to who's really keeping track of where this cobalt is coming from, because all these companies are coming forward and saying, let's see, I've got it down here somewhere. So Apple said it leads the industry in supply chain standards, and last year cut ties with the largest artisanal cobalt supplier. Microsoft told us it does not tolerate child labor and that it is working with NGOs to eliminate it. Samsung said it's mapping its supply chain, and Tesla explained it performs audits and has very little cobalt in its batteries. Okay, so here's the thing. But the article goes on to say, our investigation shows just how complicated it is to trace child mined cobalt in the global supply chain. We followed the mineral as it left the mines, piled high on every mode of transport available, including bicycles. Sacks were already mixed up without labels, making it impossible to know who had mined the minerals inside. So even if these companies have the best intentions, or they've been pressured, or for whatever other reasons they say, hey, we don't want child labor involved in the cobalt that we're buying, it's going to be very difficult to make sure that that's actually what's happening. So on one hand, I think that this is good news, that we are considering cobalt mines within the US, so we won't have to be as dependent on the Congo for getting these materials. And at the same time, of course, this comes with some other concerns, and that is what is going to happen. Where are we mining this stuff? What are the byproducts going to be? How is it going to pollute the environment and the landscape and everything else? And we really don't know. On one hand, it will probably create some jobs and help to some extent for the economy. And on the other, who knows what the long-term implications are going to be? I don't know. And some will also argue that, well, people are working very hard in the Congo to mine this stuff, but if the alternative is they don't have any income whatsoever, is that in fact a worst-case scenario? And I don't know the answer to that. We just know that this is something that has been happening for a long time, and it's very unfortunate that children have been used in the mining process to gather cobalt by hand so that people can have it put into their lithium-ion batteries for these phones that we love so much. And, again, kind of just a dark side to all this, unfortunately. When can we expect to see a video of you harvesting precious metals off dead electronics? You mean like that 3 cents worth of gold that's built into your phone? Probably not anytime soon, Harvey. But that's funny. I was just talking about that the other day. The harvesting of precious metals from disposed electronics result in big chemical pollution. Yeah, there seems to be a lot of issues with getting the materials that we need for electronics in a clean way, you know, that's not going to leave a huge footprint of one type or another that has some sort of negative impact. And if you talk to most people, they would say, I'm completely opposed to most of these processes that take place in order for me to have my cell phone, but try taking their cell phone away. So yeah, it's a strange thing. Even China is getting out of the recycling business out of environmental concerns. How do you recover copper from PCBs? You have to crush them and dissolve them in an epoxy solvent. Yeah, I've actually seen that process. If you haven't, I'll try to find the video where they take phones and computers and all sorts of other electronics and they basically grind them up and then use a chemical process to float different things based on their density and their weights to separate them, and then they harvest them and use them for other stuff. But they do it on a pretty huge scale. So you've got, you know, big like dumpster bins full of this stuff that's being smashed up. And I won't be in that business anytime soon, as you can imagine. So I was looking forward to Nate's reaction here to see if they're opening any cobalt mines in your part of Idaho, but maybe he's busy at the moment. All right, so we got one more here and 10 minutes to go. Man, almost nailed it. Perfect. Apple Store robberies. Yes, it's still happening, and this is becoming a real problem for Apple, and I would assume that that means because it's costing Apple money, obviously, for these thefts, you know, unless it's the insurance companies that are paying for it, which I'm not sure exactly how that's going to work out, because at a certain level it doesn't make sense to file an insurance claim, and when it does, then it affects your insurance rate. So how are they handling these? Probably small numbers for Apple. But recently, on Monday, an Apple store in Costa Mesa, California was robbed by a group of 5 people who snatched $29,000 worth of merchandise from display tables. Okay, just a couple drops in the bucket for Apple, obviously. Earlier this month, thieves stole over $27,000 in phones and computers in Fresno, California, and more than $19,000 worth of iPhones from the store in Huntington Station, New York. So this seems to be a developing trend for Apple, and the article pretty much talks about how, one, you know, the design of the store is conducive to this type of theft, because when you go to an Apple store, they've got all this equipment sitting out on tables because obviously they want you to come in, try it out, enjoy your experience, and decide to buy one of their products. Wow, this is weird. My browser just froze completely. It is not moving at all. They want you to come in and check this stuff out, have fun with it, and say, hey, I want to buy one of these. And the whole environment is set up for that. But there is a downside here. I don't know what's going on with this browser. There's a downside, of course. Last month, thieves stole over $100,000 worth of Apple products at Best Buy by breaking into the roof. More than 300 iPhone X devices worth over $370,000 were taken from a UPS truck in November. So lots of thefts going on, but I think the one inside the store would make me question what... Oh, this is interesting. We have grab and run burglar striking at Walnut Creek Apple Store. Have you guys seen this? This is not far from where I'm at. I haven't even watched this video. And unfortunately, I can't play it right here, or YouTube will. I will anger the YouTube gods. But I didn't know that there was a grab and run at the Walnut Creek store in the Apple Store in Walnut Creek. But it would make sense because they have a big opening facing the street. So if you've got tens of thousands of dollars worth of merchandise, you know, practically on a sidewalk sale, it's kind of inevitable that at some point someone's going to say, hey, you know what? If 10, 12 people walk in here and everyone grabs a device all at once, first of all, they're not going to be able to catch everyone. Second of all, it appears as though Apple's employees have been instructed not to pursue shoplifters or people who walk through the store breaking everything with the hammer, which, you know, I understand, but what does that mean? You know, what steps do you take to prevent this from happening? Can they not make demo units that don't have the same value as the real thing? Are these not secured? They're tied down with an alarm of some sort, right? But obviously it's not enough to deter someone, probably with, I don't know, I would suspect maybe a pair of wire cutters or something along those lines. And you look at this first picture and they're like right out on the street. There's no way you're going to close the door on the person as they run away. So ultimately what happens in most cases is that these are considered a cost of doing business and they end up getting passed on to the consumer. So anyone who's buying an Apple product can assume that some small percentage of that price tag goes to pay for this merchandise that's walking out of the store or running out of the store when people come in and do these grab and runs. Crazy. Best Buy heist the movie. That's a good idea. Yeah. Has anyone heard about a heist to a Brazilian factory of Samsung a while ago? I did not hear about that one. But I have a strong feeling we're going to start hearing about a lot of Apple stores experiencing the same problem, and eventually they're going to have to come up with a solution, because right now it's kind of like doors wide open, tons of money sitting on the table. And the one consistent thing about these grab and runs here that I was going to mention, which is interesting. Oh, where is it? Where'd it go? All of these robberies seem to be taking place involving groups of men in hoodies who quickly grab an armful of products. So I guess if it's July and there's someone in your store with a hoodie checking out a $2,000 MacBook, you should probably keep an eye on them. Maybe is that profiling? If someone's wearing a hoodie and you pick them out of the crowd, is that profiling? I'm not sure. Not sure how that works. I've recently seen a grab and run at my local CVS. If someone's willing to shoplift tampons, stealing iPhones is far more profitable. Completely. I would agree. They're demo units with iCloud accounts at Apple, yet people still steal them, just like how people steal cars nowadays. Yeah, it's a strange thing. I mean, obviously, if it's functional at any level, even if it's a demo unit, even if there's a cloud on it, they're going to probably sell it to someone else who thinks they're getting a great deal. And then it gets transferred and they've received stolen property, technically, if you think about it. And then they can't get the device to work. They go to Apple and say, hey, what's wrong with this? And they go, oh, that's one of ours. I don't know if they confiscated at that point or what, but chances are they're going to end up on Craigslist or at some sort of swap meet or something like that. And then you'll have a disappointed buyer, or they get stripped for parts. I mean, I guess that's always the other alternative, right? Well, friends, that's it. I got everything within an hour today, and I am going to log off here shortly. Anything else we need to talk about? Anything just groundbreaking that's happening with phone stuff, with repair stuff? Next week on Monday, my plan is to do a live stream of repair here on my bench, possibly some product demos. We'll see what happens. I'm cursed when it comes to ISPs for some reason. And also, coincidentally, mine decided to raise my internet access rate by $50 for no apparent reason. So I've got to call them, which I'm even thinking about recording that phone call because I'd love to hear the reaction. And Harvey and everyone else out there who said just call and threaten to cancel, I am probably going to do that. So, and by the way, I had a conversation with a friend of mine who did exactly that, and he is canceled now. So there's a small percentage of a chance that when you call customer service and say, I've had it with you guys, I'm ready to quit, if you encounter the right employee who doesn't care too much about you, their job, their employer, and just says, okay, fine, go ahead and quit, which I have experienced at least once with a certain online store that starts with A, that's all I'm going to say, where I said, hey, I have a problem with this product. And they said, oh, that's fine. We'll cancel your account. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute, hold on. I'm looking for a resolution. I'm not trying to discontinue your service. So once in a while, if you get the wrong person, that may backfire on you. But hopefully I can figure out a plan B in case they call or they call me calling their bluff, something along those lines. You need a female voice. Ask your girlfriend to negotiate with your ISP. Harvey, maybe I will give that a shot. Did you see Charter lose their rights to operate in New York City? I did not. What happened? What happened to Charter? I did not hear about this. Can we look it up? Sure we can. We have a browser right here. Charter NYC. Let's see what the news says. Charter to expand small cell trials in Louisiana. What is it, Charter? Did you see Charter lose their... Do you have a link, Greg? I haven't seen that. I'm not sure what that's about, but I'm curious. You phone and want to schedule a disconnect of your service. Do not call sales department. Customer retention is STIO in when you call in a disconnection. Okay, so call to schedule a disconnect. Is that what you're saying? I'll give that a shot. maybe that'll happen. Remember Trinidad? Oh, yes, Vernil. I do remember Trinidad. I will not forget. I've actually done some reading about that, about people running through the mud and all sorts of interesting stuff going on there. I had not forgotten. I'm about 15 minutes delayed. Mike, haven't heard about the mining. Okay, I was just curious, Nate. They've got cobalt mines coming to Idaho soon. In fact, there's a Canadian company that already bought one, and they're supposed to start pretty soon. So I'm curious to see how that's going to affect, if it's anywhere close to your area, which it probably isn't. Just curious. The Verge has an article, Charter could lose its New York operations after failing to expand broadband network in New York. Let's see if I can find that real quick before we get off of this crazy train. All right, here we go. Thank you. Thank you, Greg. I see it now. Charter could lose its New York operations. Failing to expand broadband network. I haven't read this article, so I don't know exactly what it says, but it'll be interesting. It agreed to bring high-speed broadband network access to 145,000 unserved homes and businesses, but New York state officials have found Charter has continually failed to meet its commitments. Shocker. According to a statement published last week, they conducted an audit and found in March that many homes and businesses Charter counted as new deployments were actually parts of the state the company was supposed to serve originally outside of the 2016 agreement. And that's interesting, and we will have to watch that and see what happens, and really need to have net neutrality and some sort of regulation and some sort of competition. If we have one company that offers broadband and nobody else, that in this day and age, I think we all agree that that is the definition of monopoly. Whatever it is that you have. If you said, hey, only I make X, that's fine. But if everybody relies on X to survive, to do business, to work, to communicate, then if there's no competition, there has to be regulation. And I read an interesting article recently that I'll try to find where it pretty much explains how taxpayers built the internet. We paid for the infrastructure of the internet. We've turned it over to private corporations who haven't made good on their promises to build it out, to expand it the way that they said they would, who are getting funding, from government agencies and so forth continually. And this thing that we paid for, we don't own, and maybe we should. Maybe the citizens should own the internet. Maybe it shouldn't be private companies. Yes, I know, Harvey, as soon as I say that, I'm going to start lagging here and have all sorts of problems, but whatever. Vernil, I will certainly let you know if I can ever get to Trinidad amongst a lot of other places I want to visit. I will absolutely contact you before I leave. All right, guys, that is it for this evening. I'll be in the chat for a couple minutes. I'm going to log out here pretty quick and be back again on Monday, 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Again, next week here, Thursday at 6. Until then, you guys enjoy your weekend. We're almost there. 2 more days, and I will talk to you on the next episode.